I grew up in Salina and lived there until during World War II, when I moved to Columbus and worked for Curtiss-Wright in a war plant. My mother's name was Nancy Pfennig, and she married Justice Gilberg. My mother worked in the bank, and then when women were married, they quit working. And that was true for me when I was first married. My dad worked for my grandfather, who had a newspaper, a weekly newspaper, and he wrote a lot for the paper. And it was also a printing office, and they worked there. And then after my grandfather was gone, he had a number of jobs. He was a salesman and then moved around with that job for a while, but he had government jobs. He was a county auditor for 12 years. That was going through 3 elections, and had some other county or government, Ohio state jobs. And then he eventually got back to reporting again, and he reported for about 12 city papers all around us, from Fort Wayne to Lima to Dayton, and even to the Cleveland Plain Dealer, which was a couple hundred miles away. He made their front page once when there wasn't much news and there was a big accident near Salina, and he had the headline and a big article on the front page. He was very happy with that.
Do you still have that newspaper?
Yeah, no, but I have the front page.
Oh, you do?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I'd love to see it.
It was about a year and a half when his mother died. Quite close. I always thought it probably wasn't, but I was wrong. It was. And when I moved to Columbus, he already lived there with my aunt and uncle. And I saw him occasionally. He and my uncle worked at Curtiss-Wright too. Almost everyone in town did that could get away. And but they put planes together. I worked in the office. He lived with my aunt and uncle, and my uncle was a very great salesperson, and so they used him and sent him to the places that weren't doing well, and they would live someplace for less than a year and then be sent someplace else. They lived in like 15 cities and enjoyed it, I think. And then once they got to Columbus, they stayed there. But he finally moved to New York, and they followed him. And they lived in, not Manhattan, but just north of it. I was very close to a girl by the name of Mary Jo Davis, and we just called her Jo, and we couldn't have been closer. And she got married after college, before I did, and she died of cancer. And I've missed her ever since, and made a lot of close friends along the way, but still remember her. No one came up with a nickname. She tried to create one, but no one used it.
What was that?
So she gave up. She just thought the part of my name, just, but no one did it.
So she called you Jus?
She tried to, but it didn't work, so she quit. Didn't have a nickname. People didn't do that then. They maybe went to Yellowstone, and that's about it. We didn't do much traveling through the 30s and 40s, and then the war was here. It wasn't until after World War II that people started traveling. The 30s was a depression.
Yeah.
Everyone was poor. No one knew it, that they were poor, but they were. The first time I really traveled, Roy gave me a surprise vacation for Christmas one year to go to London. I could hardly believe it. And our kids by then were in middle school. Dog, it was a surprise one Christmas when I wasn't 6 yet, and had him until I was out of high school. I didn't try. I had more B's than A's. I didn't try. I don't know. It didn't interest me that much, I guess. I don't know. I liked my math and some of those kinds of classes. We had a class in drama, and I ended up with leads in plays, and I did 10 times. I did programs, like a 10-minute program, like not a speech, but a program. You impersonated someone. Well, movies were big in the 30s, very big in the 30s, and I went to lots of movies. When he was in Salina on vacation, he went with a friend, and they had a cottage, and his friend knew someone I worked with, and they were supposed to meet, and she kept putting him off, and she didn't want to see him. And finally, the last night they were there, she agreed to go to a movie, but she only would go if I would come too. So he was the extra person, and I was with her, and we met, and I didn't think anything would come of it, but I guess he asked them for addresses and phone numbers and things, because then he wrote to me. And then he joined the military. He joined the Navy just before he would have been drafted. That's what they all did.
Yeah.
They waited as long as they could and tried to decide which they wanted. Out on a date and got home late, but we knew about it. And I didn't get up till noon the next day. And it was on I think a Saturday night, maybe a Friday night. And started hearing about it. Yes, it was on the radio. News didn't get around very fast back then. I didn't date him till after the war. He wrote to me during the war. I'd only seen him that one night when we went to a movie, and I wrote back. We wrote to a lot of the guys, anyone we could, to get letters to them. Once in a while, they would dock and they'd dump a bunch of mail off and pick up mail. He came home. He had an injury. They had great big things to load the ship, and someone didn't put this covering on it right. It was like 12, 15 feet across, and it wasn't put on right, and he walked across it and it gave way, and he fell, and he had a head injury. So he was in California for probably 10 months, I don't know. He was to go back to duty, and he had a vacation to go home once, and I didn't see him at that time. And he was going back, and he got as far as Chicago when the war ended. So he didn't go all the way back. He came to visit me once he was home in the fall of 45, I suppose. But he came to Columbus, and then he kept coming back, and then he had me finally come to Cleveland and visit, and it went on, and very dramatic weekends. And he came to Salina. We both would go there. I could go directly by bus, and he could go directly by train. And I said that I couldn't marry him just by all these wild weekends. I needed to be around him to really get to know him in a more normal way. So I moved to Cleveland, and we weren't married for another year. No, because it was kind of talked about for a long time, so it wasn't a real dramatic thing.
Did he ask your dad for permission?
Yes, that bothered him, and there was no need for it to, but it bothers every guy, I guess, that does it. And there's never generally any need to. We didn't have lots of money, and we went to movies still, and had a lot of friends, just did things with people. He went to college when he got back. The government offered it to people, and he took advantage of that, and that took a while. We waited till he was out of college, is why we waited. Everyone quit work after they had a family, so there were a lot of women and children in the neighborhood to do things with. But I mean, we did things like go to the zoo or go to the museum. We bought our first house, which was a small new double, and lived in it, and we were living there when Doug was born. And then we wanted to get something, a single, and something a little bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And the first house, then we bought another double, but we didn't stay in it. And then we bought a single on Lake Road in Bay. That was when Doug was about 10. When we lived on Lake Road in Bay, we started renting a trailer and going on a big vacation, long vacation, and far. We took it up into Michigan and up north that way a lot of times. And we took it to the West Coast once. We lived in it out on the Oregon coast. Before Doug was born, we got a TV, and it was fine, except once it caught fire and he threw it in the front yard.
How did it catch fire?
Just the way they were made back then.
So he picked it up and threw it out the front door?
Well, you gotta do something with it. Well, he was at the wheel the whole time. When he was in the Navy,
yeah,
there were, I don't know, 4 or 5 of them, and they just slept up there. They had a sleeping bag on the floor, and that was a fairly good sized area, and they'd sleep there. They never went down below deck. At times they had thousands of passengers that they were, I don't know, soldiers, that they were taking someplace, and he said the ship was about the length of a city block, and they always had him at the wheel when they landed. And I thought, my gosh, he parked that thing?
Wow. And he was only in his early 20s at that time. So he would have been,
yeah.
He was 20 years old.
Yeah, well, a little more. And they were attacked by kamikazes. That's the guys that would try to fly their plane into you.
Yeah.
The fuel was in different places on every ship.
Oh, so they didn't know.
Otherwise, they'd hit it.
They knew where to hit it, yeah.
So they had to guess. So they were coming at him once when he was at the wheel, and he said, I started to run, and the captain yelled at me. And he came back, and they hit him, but then that section was walled off, closed off, and had water in it from then on, but it didn't affect the rest of the ship. That's how they were made, to close off sections, little sections. Once they didn't dock, he wasn't on land for over a year once.
And he was at Iwo Jima too, right?
He saw them put that up.
He saw the guys put that flag up. Wow. Did he talk to you about the war?
Not much, except once. Once after dinner, he started talking, and he talked for a whole hour, and I couldn't remember it. I mean, there was so much. I know once they were, there's a word for it, they were moving, and it was a lot of ships. They were a mile apart and probably 10 miles wide, and I don't know how long, and going somewhere. And every ship was black, dark, completely dark. And he had to do something electrical, turn on something, and he got a hold of the truck lights instead and turned them on. And he expected to be court-martialed, and the captain never said a word to him. He knew. They didn't talk about it. Once he got started, though, he really poured it out, and it was an hour. We just sat at the table and he talked. But it was so fast and so much, and I couldn't remember it. Not that I was particularly trying to, but I would have. But
so, did he keep in touch with any of his buddies from the war, people that he met over there?
Very little, very little. There was someone out in Washington State that he kept in. He had his address. He thought he'd see him sometime, but we never did. I don't know. And I'm sure he remembered a lot of them very much, but they didn't get together. I worked for an insurance company in Salina for a few years at first, and then I knew there was no future there, and I wasn't happy with it, and I could have had a scholarship and gone to college, but I would probably have gone to art school, and I couldn't see making money and paying it back, and there was no job in Salina for someone graduating from art school. And I didn't think beyond that, and I didn't do it. I wanted to move to Columbus, and some man got me a job with an insurance company in Columbus. Once I got there, my aunt and uncle and brother talked me into, oh, don't go there. You earn half again as much if you'd go out to Curtiss-Wright. So I went out, and because of my name being Gilberg, some gal who was Jewish and thought that I was sat beside me, and we talked, and I liked her, and I would have seen her again, but there was never any time. And she told me that she was going to apply to work in payroll. And that sounded like a good idea. It was at least a cut above, And so I didn't expect it, but she said they'd ask you, and so they asked me what department I wanted to apply to go to, and so I didn't know, and I said payroll. And so they knew about this particular job, so they suggested me for it, and I didn't know what it was going to be. They had to have written orders for anything that left the plant, whether it was a bolt to get an airplane up somewhere or whether it was 100 planes. But an order had to be typed and given to every department head, which was 10, 12 people, but about a half a dozen more if it was for the Navy, and almost everything was for the Navy. So that was the job they gave me, and the orders for the Navy, no one went in their offices. There was a door and a receptionist, and you didn't see that. And so I took those 5, 6 orders to her, and then someone came and got them. And the rest I gave to all of the men that were at the heads of all the various different departments. And I liked it okay. And my aunt and uncle seemed to think that was a very prestigious job, and I don't know that it was. They took me to the Indiana State contest, and I came in about 4th place there or something from all the schools in Indiana. When I was in 4th grade, I was kind of bored, and there was a picture of Santa Claus profile outline, and I copied it on my blackboard, and I could tell that I had it right, and everyone was real impressed. And then there was something in school that I copied on the blackboard that was good too. And after that, I kind of followed that, but nothing much happened, and no one posed for me. I would draw people while they were asleep. After I was married and lived in Cleveland, Roy wanted me to go to the Cleveland Art Institute. My teacher had gone to Chicago and wanted me to go there, but like I say, spend all that money and go and come out and not be able to make any money at it. mean, my dad was asked that by Andy Hitchcock, and he thought about it a little bit, and he said radio. People couldn't understand radio. That was the biggest. TV, not so much, but radio. Oh, I was a little girl when my dad got his first radio. They were great big things. They were furniture. I suppose in my time, the most unusual thing was getting into outer space, the technical end of it. We were on vacation in Canada.
You were on vacation in Canada?
Yeah.
Did you watch it on TV live, or did you just hear the news?
No, we were on a ferry going to an island somewhere, and all the Canadians yelled, "Yay for the Yanks." Well, my parents knew his parents. I never met him. When I was living in Columbus.
Wait, your parents knew?
They knew his parents. They met him for lunch on Sundays.
They knew Neil Armstrong's parents?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. How did they know each other?
Well, he came, my dad was county auditor in our county, and they lived in Wapakoneta, and they came to his office on business every other week or something, and so he was with them sometimes. They knew him.
So your parents met Neil Armstrong?
They were friends, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Well, probably not. I was living in Columbus, and the times that I would be home weren't the middle of the week when they would be in my dad's office. But they went to Wapak. There was a good restaurant there, and a lot of times they'd have Sunday dinner or lunch with them.
Did you think when you were born that you'd live 100 years?
No, and I haven't done it either yet. But no, I'm very good health, and better health than my dad was.
Yeah,
He could have lived longer. I lost Roy, and I wasn't being good about being with him, and he could have lived longer, but I won't go into that. He could have. So I think sometimes maybe I will. So that's why I'm kind of hanging on to the Bitcoin and waiting to see. But it's so slow. It's not
doing anything?